a 60-second opening statement, and then the questions. The first candidate has 90 seconds, the second candidate has 60 seconds, and we'll rotate who goes first. And so the first question, so this is the opening statement, so you each have 60 seconds. And please introduce yourself and tell the audience the top 3 priorities you plan to address as county auditor.
Good evening, I'm Barb Fuller, and I would like to be your next Island County Auditor. And I truly appreciate those of you that stay in the room to hear us. I know we're not nearly as romantic as those before us, but here we are. And so when I introduce myself to people and say, I want to be Island County Auditor, sorry, I'm trying to get on that, everybody's like, why? So, tell you a little bit about me. So my first career, I was in law enforcement for about a decade. I got injured, retired out super young. And then, going much faster, I've spent the last 25 years in risk management, environmental health, and safety. All of that saying, I spent a lot of time doing compliance, risk assessments, gap analysis, trying to fix things. And when I look at what I can do for Island County, auditor is where I land. I've prepared myself to be the auditor for the last 35 years. And I want to make Island County better. Thank you.
Andrea?
Hi, thank you. I'm Andrea Downs, and I am also running for Island County Auditor. And similar to Barb, we have very similar backgrounds. I'm running for auditor because I believe the local government should be steady, transparent, accountable, and prepared for the future. My professional background has been built around public service, systems improvement, financial management, and responsible leadership. I've worked primarily in education, supporting both at a local, state, and regional level. And in each of these roles, in addition, I've also worked in program development, policy, nonprofit leadership, and I've been an elected school board director for the past 9 years. In each of these roles, I've been responsible for managing public trust, evaluating systems, improving processes, and making sure services work for the people that they're meant to serve.
Okay, and then you will be first on this question.
It's all you.
We'll have 90 seconds on this one. Question, is our vote by mail system safe and secure?
Okay, so the question is our vote by mail system safe and secure? And I think that really depends on your community, and I think it depends on whether you feel empowered by our current system or not. And I think, for example, when we introduced this topic today, there was a comment of don't forget to vote, and maybe use the ballot boxes instead of the mail. And I think that that's a really important thing that we should lean into, that we as a community, regardless of what side we're on, we're having conversations about how is our vote going to be transparently counted, and which way is the best way to make sure that that happens. I think that this is an area that the auditor really needs to have a public-facing, transparent, steady leadership regarding. People in Island County need to know that their votes are counted. They need to know that the mail-in voting system is secure in Island County, and the auditor has the ability to do that. What I would personally love to do is build more systems around education so that people know how votes happen, how votes get counted, what that system looks like, what happens if it goes in a ballot box versus what happens if it goes in the mail. And I also want to work with all of our communities across that, so not just our residents, but also our military service members who are often dependent on voting by mail, and ensuring that that moves forward.
Barbara for 60 seconds.
So, all that was very well, but I will say our mail-in ballot process is crucial for many populations that are military, they're overseas, they need it to be able to vote. People with disabilities who can't come into old school traditional, go to high school and go vote. So there are people who absolutely need it. I will say I went to the testing for the equipment 2 weeks ago at the elections office, and for me, just as a voter, it was very informative because they demonstrated how the ballots come in, the signatures are checked, every single one of them. The ballots are open. They are analyzed to see if duplicate ballots come in. And for me, it made me, just as a voter, feel more secure about those ballots are managed. In terms of making it more secure in the future, it's looking at what are our gaps, what education do we need to do, how do we keep making it accessible, how do we just make it better?
And you're first on this question with 90 seconds. Related question, what changes or improvements would you make, if any, to the elections office and its operations?
I think with any position, until you're really in that position, you don't know what the gaps are. Okay, but with that said, with people that I've spoken to, we need to look at where our ballot drop boxes are. Do we have enough of them? Are they accessible? Are they secure? You know, talk about Camino Island is a great example. They have one for the whole island. Yes, it's not the densest population in the world, but they have one. And even I had somebody telling me during the last election, there was a shadow drop box. And that's a huge issue. People are worried that their ballots are being taken away by somebody. How do we make it secure? How do we educate people to make them fully understand how the process goes? So looking at issues like that, I will say, again, when I went to the test and saw how it's done, in the last year, they introduced new equipment, which I thought was awesome. Okay, so I will give Auditor Crider credit for putting in new equipment, getting a grant to pay for that, but looking at what else do we need to make it better? How do we also make sure that we've got the staff that know what they're doing? So how many of you realize that Michelle Regan is retiring at the end of the year? Some of you do. She is, okay? And that's a major position. She is well thought of across the county, making sure that we've got somebody capable to step into those shoes to take her place. Thank you.
And you go for 60 seconds.
All right, so first off, I want to give a shout out to our election worker and staff in our county. They are doing an amazing job, and as Barb mentioned, you know, they are very well regarded across the county. The second piece that when we talk about changes or improvements, the first thing that comes to mind is presence. We need an auditor who is present. We need an auditor who is present not only on the day-to-day, but present in the community, present moving forward. And that leads to confidence in critical hires in election working staff. We are having a massive turnover of a really critical role. It's imperative that the person that we hire to replace has a smooth transition and is equipped and empowered to do the job well. That would be my biggest piece coming in looking at what changes or improvements would be being present and making sure that that's a good hire.
Okay, and you're first on this question with 90 seconds. The position of Chief Deputy Auditor has been vacant for about a year. How would you fill this position, and what duties and responsibilities would you assign to that staff member?
Yes. So the Chief Deputy Auditor in the Auditor's Office, that position has been vacant for over a year. There's been multiple attempts to try to fill that position. They've looked at increasing the salary. They've looked at filling from within. They've adjusted the requirements for what does that position need to hold. The first thing that I would be looking at, first and foremost, is I would be looking at what does our hiring pool look like? Where are we recruiting from? What ways could we make that position more incentive? This is something that I've had a significant amount of experience in education. I worked in special education where it's real hard to hire. And I was able to fill hard to hire positions consistently through that by looking at those different pieces. I think there's also looking at how do we grow from within. These positions should not be vacant without looking at a succession plan. If I look at my own role, if I were to be elected and transition into this role, there are 3 people on my team right now that I would be already saying could move into my spot. that's the forward planning that we need to have at the county, and that's where I would love to meet with the auditor team, have a deep conversation with them about what do they see as the challenges with filling that position, what do we need to look at, is there any interest or potential to fill from within, and go from there.
Barbara for 60 seconds.
So, a lot of it I acknowledge is going to be repetition. So first off, we need to change the mindset that's been the practice of, well, we'll put positions out and we'll get applicants and magically we'll fill it. Island County, okay, I will tell you, this is a great place to live. But in terms of competitive pay, this is not a great place to work financially. We need to make it a place where people really want to work. Even, I'm a part of the Island County Civil Service Commission, and we're constantly talking about how do we hire deputies, okay? Forget about this particular position for half a second. It's because they focus on making it a place where people want to work. We need to make the auditor's office a place where people want to work. Outside of that, we need to make sure that we are building people to actually take those positions. Yes, they still have to apply and compete for it and everything because it's a government job. But make it something from within, that we have people that are capable, that we're not relying upon outsiders.
And then you're first on this question with 90 seconds. Please describe your vision of the auditor's office's coordination with the treasurer's office on recording, banking, and accounting matters.
So, the auditor is a member of the finance committee for the county. It's crucial that you have to work with the treasurer. Obviously, the treasurer, all of us that are property owners, certainly we write checks that goes to the treasurer. We all love the treasurer for that. That money then, anything that's paid out comes through the auditor's office. So they're the ones that sign warrants, that pay for levies to get fixed in Clinton. It is crucial that they have a close relationship because they are determining budget policy. For example, and I was ready for this one. I'm sorry. Okay. Truly I was. I've got notes. It's my last one. But they set policy, they do the public fund stewardship, and they make sure that they maintain the records of where the money actually goes to. Your auditor is supposed to be making sure that we are complying with where money goes. People talk about, when I say auditor to people, they're like, well, you know how to audit. I have done auditing, okay, in private industry for decades at this point. I can audit. But within our county, frequently, not so much. We need to make sure that we're actually looking at things, making sure we're complying with grants, that the money is going where it's supposed to go. And part of that is the relationship with the treasurer.
Andrea, 60 seconds.
All right, so as Barb shared, kind of the way that we interact, the way that I see it is Tony, our treasurer, is accounts receivable. The auditor's office would be accounts payable. So if we think about those two pieces, anytime you're looking at any sort of an agency, you want to have multiple hands on the funding, and you don't want the same people touching the funds coming in versus the funds going out. So in terms of how that district works, that's more so kind of that overarching umbrella vision. In 30 seconds, building upon what Barb shared about the grant management, it's also not just ensuring that funds are spent in alignment and in accordance with grants, something that I'm very, very familiar with, skilled in. It's also about ensuring that you understand the difference between grants that have rollover funding versus grants that are one and done. So if you have grants that need to be spent by June 30th or December 31st, you have to ensure every dime of that is spent. Otherwise, you're sending a message that you don't need it, and we definitely need the funds in Island County.
Barbara for 60 seconds.
No, we just finished. That's her.
Oh,
I can talk more about it.
sorry. I'm ahead of myself here.
It's all good.
Thank you for paying attention. Andrea will be first on this one. The auditor is responsible for accounting and reporting of the county's financial transactions. What experience and or education do you have to prepare you for this job?
All right. So I'm going to give you just a list of degrees. I promise they're not that hoity-toity. Education is a system you have to jump through the hoop to get. So I have a master's degree in policy studies specializing in program development, program evaluation. I also have a master's degree in curriculum and instruction and a master's degree in educational leadership. All of those have financial components. I have worked extensively with budgets up to $35 million, understanding both the development process, the projection process, staffing, goods and services, contracting. I'm familiar with RFPs and how to bid RFPs as well as award RFPs and all of the processes you have to do within that. In public systems, it's really cumbersome. There's all these rules, there's all these steps you have to do, public notices. That has been my career for the last 20 years. At CADA, currently, where I'm the executive director, we're working largely in grant spaces, but also in government contracts, and so also being on the receiving end of that. Where my career really highlights is starting in Seattle School District, where I was brought in when Seattle was not spending their grants correctly and they lost funding. It was part of the team that came back to regain $5 million of federal funding. That's where my skill set really took over. That's part of why CADA hired me to be the executive director. I'm familiar with working with those systems, both when the systems are healthy and moving in the way they are, and also when they're in corrective action.
Barbara, 60 seconds.
So in terms of the accounting function, so I can start with education. So I've got a master's in business administration. I've also got a master's in safety engineering. I've also been through several different lead auditor certifications for various management systems, and I've led audit teams for compliance strictly. I have similarly led large teams with budgets. I'm not going to claim $35 million. I can't do that. But I think I've had $2 million has been my top. I am not going to claim to be a CPA. Okay, I am quite honest about that. However, I will say in terms of the audit function, I have led large teams. I've managed training them, guiding them, finding the gaps, figuring out corrective actions to make them most productive as possible, which I think is honestly the biggest skill set you need for it, rather than necessarily saying that I can check that box.
Okay, Barbara will be first on this one for 90 seconds. What is your background and knowledge of accounting software programs for government? Do you have experience in transitioning to new accounting software from purchase to integration?
Okay, I will talk about databases, okay? So, accounting software unto itself, no, okay, not gonna claim that. However, I work for Seattle Genetics, which got acquired by Pfizer, and my whole job was about developing databases for their risk management processes and then implementing them. So I went through the whole requirements development, looking at various vendors, having them doing the testing for it, rating it, and then going through the contracting process and then the implementation process, including making it custom and training the 3,000 staff members to actually use it. When Pfizer, of course, bought the Happy Startup I was working for, then went through the integration process for that. So in terms of databases in general, and I would argue that accounting software unto itself, it's a database. Whether I'm going to be able to regurgitate 6 different specifically built out accounting softwares, nah, I can't do that. Not going to claim that one. However, again, the skill set for actually identifying good fillers for that gap, absolutely 100%.
For 60 seconds.
So in terms of like accounting software systems, largely my experience has been in the educational realms. There, the systems integrate also with attendance. They integrate with any sort of like grading system, so it's like a one-stop shop platform. One of the last things I did when I worked at the Educational Service District up in Anacortes was support the merger from one system, Skyward, over to Cumulative for the cooperative programs up there. And so part of looking at all of those systems and moving forward. The first thing that I think you have to consider is you have to look at all of your outliers. So the Island County isn't just the county. county. It's also the fire districts, the water districts. We do all of the accounting and support for that. And so whatever systems we're looking at, first and foremost, we need to have everybody at the table. We need to know what their needs are, and we need to plan for our oddities, not for the routine piece. And so if we're looking at accounting systems that are spread across, each department does it. Dang it. Talk to me after.
Yes, you will each have a closing statement, an opportunity to talk more about whatever you want. But this question, Andrea is first for 90 seconds. Things have changed on this question since we wrote it, but we'll do it anyway. The Postal Service is proposing to amend the mailing standards of the United States Postal Service regarding the transmission of mail-in or absentee ballots for federal elections. How will this affect our vote-by-mail system?
Well, I think the court system voted and changed their opinion. They said that, nope, you can't. You have to continue to accept ballots in accordance with the state. So the biggest piece with this that I was really watching, and if you go to my social media pages, either Andrea the Auditor on Instagram or Andrea Downs for Island County Auditor on Facebook, you can see a post where I wrote about this. This really impacts our military communities. My husband is a former service member. He's a veteran for 21 years. I know there's other veterans in the audience that I recognize. He was often deployed, and that's how we get those ballots in. And it's really critical for our community that we be able to continue to mail in votes to ensure that we're capturing all of our perspectives across the county. In addition, I think there's also, this is part of where that question around, is my ballot safe? Is my vote being counted comes from? And I think the more that we can have transparency, communication, and education around how does the system work, why does it work the way that we do, why would we accept ballots past the election day, is always beneficial to others.
For 60 seconds.
So as you said, the courts made the decision, so not really terribly meaningful anymore. I will say that before that decision came out, somebody asked me the question. The challenge is, so as auditor, it's a nonpartisan position. Laws come out, we figure out how to make them work. We have challenges, okay? The budget is always a challenge. So if it comes down to, at some point, mail-in ballots are not acceptable for whatever reason. And we have to go back to what I experienced when I was 18 and I first voted. Standing in line for hours at the local school to vote. So many people will not be able to vote. The military, some elderly people, some other people that are just, they can't get there because of transportation reasons. People will lose their rights. Then there is, can we literally actually be able to make voting happen? The logistics of it. Thank you.
Okay, now Barbara will start. You each have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Okay, I will start by saying thank you all for sticking with us through this. Again, I know this isn't the most romantic. The other thing that I'm going to say, we briefly talked about this, the importance of showing up. I will say, please, for what it's worth, you have 2 people here who showed up for this. And every interview I'm asked for, every forum I'm asked for, I show up, for better or worse. And I think showing up is important. You have to show up for your job, for your elected position. And that's a big part of the battle. Make sure that you show up, that you care enough to actually face people, even if they occasionally ask you a question you don't like or you don't have a good answer for. But make sure you show up. I will say that I think I have an amazing background for this. I have learned to love Island County, and I want to be able to serve Island County. Some of you may remember, I tried running 4 years ago. I had no idea how to run for office. I really lost by, I think, 6 or 8%, which, considering I had no clue, I will take as a victory. And I learned a lot, and I'm approaching this a bit differently, a bit more purposefully. I set up a Facebook page, which, if anybody knows me, I really don't like social media, so I am trying really hard with that. I am, okay? And this is kind of me. I will show up. I will do everything I can for the community. And after I lost, I started looking around to see what else can I do. And that's how I ended up on that Island County Civil Service Commission because, I'm a retired cop. It made sense. And I'm not going to say that the Civil Service Commission is the most romantic commission, but I will say the comments I get back is the meetings are longer because I am one of those people I ask questions. And so I do my best for the community, and as auditor, I would do exactly the same thing, and I would do my best to make it better and more sustainable for all of us that love being here. Thank you for your time, and I'll hang out for a while if you got questions.
Andrea for 2 minutes.
Okay, so thank you again, everyone who took the time to be here to listen and to engage in the conversations both before, after, and the conversations I'm sure you're having across text messages right now. At the end of the day, Island County's Auditor's Office is about trust. Residents need to trust that their vote will be counted accurately. They need to trust that public funds are being tracked responsibly. They need to trust that records are maintained correctly. Services are accessible, and the office is prepared not just for today, but for the future. That kind of trust does not happen by accident. It comes from strong systems, clear communication, ethical leadership, and a willingness to evaluate what's working and what needs to improve. My background has prepared me for this work. I've managed public funding, I've led complex programs, I've supervised teams, I've evaluated systems, I've made really hard decisions in public service roles. You talked about the education funding systems. I've been making those cuts, and I've had to make those decisions. I understand what it means to be accountable to a community, to lead through change, and to build systems that don't depend on one person, but can continue to serve residents well over time. I'm also running with transparency. I'm a Democrat. I'm proud to be clear with voters about my values. The role of auditor requires fairness to every voter, to every candidate, and every political party. My commitment is simple. The rules should be applied consistently, the work should be done professionally, and every eligible voter should have confidence in the process. Island County deserves an auditor who is prepared, principled, and focused on service, and I would bring experience, integrity, and a deep respect for responsibility to this office. And I would be honored to earn your vote.
Thank you. So that ends our forum for tonight. Next week, same time, same place, we will have the forum for the county clerk, county assessor, and sheriff's office. And so we appreciate you all coming and listening attentively.